Welcome, everyone. My name is Anju. I am the events coordinator at Another Story Bookshop, and we are absolutely thrilled to be hosting the the National International Book Launch for I'm Good and Other Lies by Bev Katz Rosenbaum. It's such a thrill as one of Toronto's oldest independent bookshops to be hosting the launch for this very important book, very timely book. I've got copies behind me. And very soon you're going to hear a conversation between Bev and Angela Mishry. The conversation will last about 30 minutes and will be followed by questions, which can be submitted by our chat box on the Zoom webinar. I'd like to welcome you all to this event. We're so sorry it couldn't be live. Hopefully soon we'll be able to get back to live events, and we'd love to have Bev do a live reading at the store, and you can come hear that in person. But before we begin, I'd like to read our land acknowledgement. The sacred land on which we operate has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is a territory of the Huron-Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Turo Wampum says we are going to live on this land together and respect each other's sovereignty. The Dish with One Spoon is an agreement that recognizes that we live off the same resources. It is hard to eat a collective meal together off a dish with one spoon, hence protocols are put in place to ensure mutual respect and accountability to each other and to the land. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. Our intersecting communities are comprised of those native to this land, Indigenous people from other territories, as well as settlers who have come here by choice, force, or otherwise a result of colonialism and imperialism. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission 94 calls to actions reaffirms that the treaties with Indigenous peoples must be lawfully honored. We are all treaty peoples and are responsible for honoring and upholding these agreements. We are grateful for the opportunity to work on this territory and to share space with all of you. So again, welcome to the launch of I'm Good and Other Lies. For those of you just tuning in, we have a fabulous evening for you with author Bev Katz Rosenbaum and author extraordinaire Angela Mishry, who will be in conversation with Bev. We have copies for sale at Another Story Bookshop. You can order them online at anotherstory.ca. And Bev will be making a very special appearance this Saturday from 4 p.m. until 5:30 p.m. to do an outdoor book signing. So you can actually meet Bev live and in person outside Another Story Bookshop. We ask that everyone wears a mask during the book signing and remains physically distanced if you're in a lineup outside. You can just come into the store and buy copies. You don't need to reserve them in advance. But if you can't make that event and you want Bev to personally sign a copy for you or a friend or a family member, which I'm sure you do, just order them online, write a note in our note section saying, please address the copy to whomever you'd like, and we can have it ready for curbside pickup, local delivery, or shipment. And Bev's books are available at independent bookshops all across the country. So if you're tuning in from outside of Toronto, pick it up at your local indie bookstore. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Barry Jowett, who is the editor and works with DC Cormorant Books. So enjoy the evening and welcome Barry to the introduction for the event.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I think you're going to enjoy this launch. I want to thank Another Story for hosting the launch. Another Story, for those of you who are new to it, is one of the great booksellers in Toronto and in Canada. Nobody does more to support independent Canadian-owned publishers than they do. I see the orders coming from booksellers across the country, and Another Story is always at the top of the list. And they're not just like that with us; they're like that with every independent Canadian publisher. They're a great supporter of publishers and authors in this country. We want you to support them in particular, but also all independent Canadian booksellers. A year and a half ago, when the world shut down, booksellers like Another Story found ways to get books to you, while major online retailers were de-emphasizing books and building rocket ships on the backs of overworked employees. So support your independent booksellers. They will have your back. And as we return to something resembling normalcy, I hope we'll see independent booksellers back in their rightful place as the centers of the literary community, because no one serves authors and readers better than your local independent bookseller. And Another Story is just about the best of the bunch. Tonight, of course, we're launching Bev Katz-Rosenbaum's new book, I'm Good and Other Lies. When I first got this manuscript, I wasn't sure if I wanted to read a book about the pandemic, but as I was reading it, I realized this is exactly the book I wanted to read, and that everyone will want to be reading right now. It's got some heavy stuff in it, but ultimately it's about resiliency and finding a road to a bright future, no matter what the world throws at you. It's inspiring, but it's also a pat on the back to every young person who had their lives ripped away from them, but still managed to come through it okay. So on behalf of everyone at DCB, I want to congratulate Bev on the publication of a book that I think is going to mean a lot to a lot of readers. I'm going to turn things over now to Angela Misery. Angela is the author of the Portia Adams Adventure series and several essays on Sherlock Holmes. And she's the author of the popular middle grade series, Tales from the Apocalypse. The first book in that series is called Pickles versus the Zombies and won the Hackmatack Children's Choice Book Award and was shortlisted for the 2021 Manitoba Young Readers' Choice Awards. The second book is called Trip of the Dead. It's in bookstores now and was on the Festival of Literary Diversity's summer reading list. And the third book is called Val Hamster, and I'm in the middle of editing it right now. It's going to be out in early 2022. So over to you, Angela.
Thanks so much, Barry. This is such an honor to be able to do this tonight. Bev, good evening. Congratulations.
Thank you. And yes. Thank you for doing this. I'm so excited for everyone watching. Angela and I are actually neighbors, so it's always nice to do something with a friend too.
What's funny is we're in pandemic and we're locked down, but we actually could walk over to each other's houses and do this together.
We did actually get a couple texts from me during the pandemic saying, I'm walking by your house, please come outside.
Totally true.
We scream at each other through our masks.
So I'm going to read this bio, which is very formal, but it's very true. So Bev Katz-Rosenbaum is the author of I Was a Teenage Popsicle series, Who is Tanksy, which I loved, by the way, and most recently, I'm Good and Other Lies. She has taught creative writing at Centennial College and is an award-winning publishing industry veteran. Rosenbaum is a devoted coffee drinker, I can attest to this, and chocoholic, and spends her downtime reading, baking, and watching movies, and helping other people with their writing. I just have to put that in. Bev helps everyone I know with their writing. So let's talk about—
I charge them for it.
You do. But you also like talk it out loud with us, which I appreciate.
I do. We brainstorm at our coffee shops.
We're going to talk about I'm Good and Other Lies, which, as Barry said, is such a moment in time kind of book. And it's so important that we have books like this, because it's really weird to think that we might come out of this pandemic and no one writes about it. And you did this. And I really liked how you moved us through the stages of the pandemic without like marking time. How was that as a writer? I have to ask that question first.
Okay, well, this settle in. There's a long answer to this.
I'm ready.
This book, are you ready for this journey? This book was a journey. I was actually very lucky at the beginning of the pandemic to already have a full draft of a manuscript. It was a very early version of this book. It was basically Kelsey, my main character's story, just the story of Kelsey and her family. It did not have the pandemic thread in it. This proved kind of a lucky thing, because I'm sure you can understand as a writer, and all the writers watching this, you know, we were all so terrified at the beginning of the pandemic. We were all so stressed out. Life had turned upside down. It was hard for a lot of people to create something from nothing. It takes a certain kind of concentration, and that we just didn't have at that stage. So, and also when the pandemic started, I thought, okay, I had shown this manuscript to some people in the publishing industry, and I was hearing great character, great voice, love the writing, but and I knew as an editor, it didn't have enough structure or plot. The story needed something to hang on.
Got it.
And when the pandemic started, I thought, oh, this character, imagine. And of course, also we were hearing all these stories about very soon after the first lockdown started, about how the increases in domestic abuse and substance use and all of this. And I thought, oh man, and my heart really went out to all those people that were suddenly stuck in these terrible situations 24/7 in lockdown. So it all just kind of came together. And I thought, and for me too, I thought, okay, this is going to be a good project for me to take my mind off things too, while I'm freaking out. I need something to really occupy my mind. And I don't know about you, but for me, writing is a kind of like mindfulness
Therapy.
exercise. When you're in that flow state, everything else, thoughts of all else fall away. So I was very busy with editing too, which I was really grateful for, because I found that to be a lot easier than writing. And also it was a lot easier to revise something than to write something from scratch. So what ended up happening was Barry had, I forget exactly if Barry saw the first pandemic version of the manuscript. Now, interestingly, I didn't write about this pandemic. I made up some future pandemic, because I was already hearing that publishers didn't want pandemic books. So I thought, and because I work in publishing, I knew that, there's usually a 2-year gap from when you sell a manuscript until it comes out. And I thought, who knows in 2 years what will be going on? So I made up a pandemic. When Barry saw the book, he said, no, I want it to be about this pandemic. And I want you to really lean into Toronto, this pandemic. So I think by the time I was working on those revisions with Barry, the period of time I was writing about had already passed. So then I was very excited about these revision notes. I think Barry's suggestions were amazing. Huge shout out to Barry, made the book so much better. And so at that point I had to go back and figure out what happened when. For example, I had to figure out what the TDSB did about synchronous and asynchronous, all that stuff. My kids are older, so I didn't know what was happening in the schools. So I had to go back and figure all that stuff out. And that was a little bit of a tough job.
But it's funny, it takes you back to those times. Like you remember as Kelsey goes through them, you're like, oh, right, that's when that happened. Oh yeah, that's when that happened.
Yes.
Which is great. Without actually like saying the dates or this is March or something like that. Yeah, it was really well done. I liked it a lot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, that's a hard thing to do as a writer, keep that timeline straight. And when do you mention times? And
well, I will give credit to Barry too for doing that with my writing too, is he keeps me like, he gets me focused on that. So there's some really tough elements. There's some really tough themes in this book: drug use, abandonment, loneliness, suicide. How did you navigate those with such poise and, oh my God, so much empathy? I can't even talk about how much empathy I felt coming out of this book. Like, I know you, so I know where it's coming from, but anyone reading this, it's pouring out of it. There's a lot of empathy, there's a lot of understanding.
That's so nice to hear. It's tricky writing about all that stuff, but I think I use humor a lot. So there is a lot of humor in the book. And I do this in my personal life too. I know even at my therapy sessions, I'm always trying to make everything into a funny anecdote, no matter how painful. I want to get the laugh. So I think it's not always, it's kind of a defense mechanism in a way, but I think it works well on the page. Because it helps to leaven all the heavy stuff. So
yeah, it's authentic, it has empathy, but it's not like in your face constant, right? And Kelsey has a lot of that too. I mean, how much of Kelsey is in you and how much of you is in Kelsey, just out of curiosity?
I think all of our characters are versions of us, right?
Yep.
I know that you, on top of the 5 jobs you already do, probably want to be out there solving mysteries like Portia.
How do you know I'm not, Beth?
Or at least hosting a true crime podcast. I think we need to be hosting a true crime podcast. Anyway, I think she's the wittier version of me. I think she comes up with stuff like that, where I'm lying in bed till 4 a.m. trying to think of witty responses to things. But Yeah, so she's my better self. She doesn't pop off as much as I do. She's less impulsive. She's not perfect, but she's better than me. She's my better self.
Well, this is the thing about her, right? She's very approachable. She's very like, you know, this person in your life,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
aspects of her in
yeah.
your life. Was that like a purposeful, because you're writing about a teenager. How old is Kelsey? She's what, 15?
So she'd be in her last year of high school, so 16.
16. So how did you get into that mindset of the 16-year-old girl?
Yeah, I think people are people, and I think she's a bit of an old soul. So I didn't really, I mean, anyone who knows me knows, like, I'm still listening to Taylor Swift, and
Wait, this is a criticism? What's the problem
yeah,
here?
like, no, like, I mean, I'm really deeply into pop culture, so I guess that keeps the kind of teen part of me alive. But people are people, and she's a bit of an old soul.
Well,
So,
sometimes you post those selfies and I swear to God, you look like your teenage self. You look
well, thank you so much.
way more put together than I was as a teenager.
Oh my God, it's way more put together than I was as a teenager. That's why I'm doing them now.
So I posted my review of I'm Good and Other Lies, and in it I described this as a book you should hand to a teen who's struggling with this moment. But now I'm thinking of revising it to hand it to really anyone who's struggling with this moment. Who did you write it for?
Yeah, so like I said, I wrote it for, my heart really went out to the kids who were really in bad situations at home. But I think you said, there's really something in it for everyone who has gone through this. And again, shout out to Barry, because once we leaned into making it about this pandemic, Barry had great suggestions. For example, initially the relationship with Luca was going to fizzle out kind of the same way as the friendship with Molly did at the beginning. Luca was just gonna kind of distance himself because of Kelsey's mother.
Yeah.
But once we wove in the pandemic thread, Barry said it would be nice to see an example of a relationship that kind of was just starting to bloom, and then boom, lockdown, didn't get a chance to really develop. So, that was we tried to put something in there for everyone, almost every kind of pandemic experience anyone would have had. It was also Barry's idea to insert all those texts between Kelsey and her friend.
I love those.
Yeah. So those, I didn't even start those with the intention of having the friend's mom get sick, but that idea came to me. I thought, many of us have, know of someone who got very ill or died, or so I decided to make that text exchange develop into Michaela's mom getting really sick. And
it's funny how this was both a very specific teenage pandemic story, and yet I have so many reminders of my teenage years of losing friends that way. Not specifically because my mother was, a problem, and you people should find out that this woman is a problem. But also because like anything would come up and suddenly your friend is ghosting you and you have no idea. And years later, you're like, I wonder what happened to that person. It broke my heart, right?
Yeah. So, I still don't really think of it solely as a pandemic book. I mean, cover and theme aside, and this is another interesting thing. The lockdown doesn't come until actually halfway through the book, like around page 100. Normal, and that was partly for writerly reasons, because I just felt having the whole thing in the house and the lockdown, it would just be too claustrophobic and too, scenes would be redundant. So I had a long kind of setup, which kind of bugged me as a writer, because I'm used to having like the short one act and then the long act two. And then, so it affected my structure. But it's not solely a pandemic book. It's about somebody she would be going through hard stuff even without the pandemic. And so it's for anybody who's gone through hard stuff, been in those difficult situations. Yeah.
I actually really like that there was a longer part in the front. I understand as a writer why you were like,
yeah. But
I like the longer part of the front because it gives you that context of,
Yes.
oh, things were going wrong here and they're going wrong here. Like things are always going wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And I wanted to emphasize the fact that, you know, for the first time in her life, she's seeing, having some hope because she's thinks she's going to be getting away to university the following year, so allowing herself some hope. She's in this crummy situation, going to this new school, not having any friends, but she gets this part-time job. She's starting to make friends, you know, having some hope. And then I cruelly snatched it away from her.
Well, let's talk about that a bit though, because I was really happy with the ending. I was really dreading. I was like, oh God, is everything going to go to shit? Like,
yeah.
So can you talk about the ending? Like, did you start off that way? Did it always end on a, I don't want to give anything away, but did it always end on an up?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, at that period of time, so I think it ended in, like when the school year ended in 2020, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, things were looking, you know, a little bit hopeful.
Yeah.
We forget, you know, there were waves to this thing, and we were already hearing about vaccines being developed too. And personally, that was when I started to relax a bit. I thought, okay, there is going to be an end to this thing. Here we are, and it's still not ended, but but things were feeling a little more hopeful at that time. The lockdowns had, you know, had a good result, and things were looking up. As it turned out, the people in Kelsey's year did not end up doing in-person university. I know a lot of kids who didn't lose the year, but we're doing it at home virtually.
Yeah, absolutely true. Okay, so before I move on to audience questions, I need to ask what you're working on next. All the fans want to know, what are you working on now?
And, you know, I'm not as prolific as a lot of other YA authors, but I'm working on an idea. I'm never sure how much I'm supposed to say about it at this, like it's with my agent right now, but I only write things that really pull at me. I don't write for the sake of writing. So unless I feel like I really have to tell a story. Anyway, I read this article in The Atlantic a few years ago about a woman named Amelia Bassano, and she is widely known as the Dark Lady of Shakespeare's sonnets. She's also the first woman to call herself a professional poet in the English language. And she is a new and highly credible candidate in the Shakespeare authorship question. And I was just blown away. Why haven't I heard? And as it turns out, there's been a little bit of an Amelia Bassano renaissance in the last few years, and academics are looking at her anew. But I'm writing a YA about Amelia in her
That's so exciting.
teens, and imagining that she makes this deal with Will, this writing deal.
Because she's on a first name basis with Mr. Shakespeare.
This deal would have benefited them both. Anyway, lots of conjecture on my part, but yeah, kind of a romp in the vein of A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. That
I
kind of
love that.
deal. But it's way out of my comfort zone. It's the first historical I've ever written. So
Well,
I have an
talk to
expert
me, my
in you.
friend.
I will be talking to you. Yeah, for sure.
Anytime.
Yeah, I
All
love the Portia Adams book so much.
you're very
Anyone
kind.
watching and the Pickles versus Zombies book, all amazing. Angela's great, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go to Susan's question. So Susan asks, Bev, I'm curious about the title of your book. Was it you who came up with the title? How many tries did it take? Any alternatives you'd like to share?
I have to say, I am the title queen. This was my title, I was a teenage popsicle, which I think that book sold like solely on the strength of the title. This one, I was proud of the book too, but you know, so many people have made comments to me about the title "I'm Good and Other Lies," and I just think it's a sentiment that everyone can relate to, especially having gone through the pandemic. You know?
And it's the funny witty of Kelsey's, right? Yeah. Were there any alternatives?
No, very
That
never
was it.
suggested anything.
Oh my
The
God.
issue of the title never No, we never discussed it, never
Okay,
came up. It was just-
Joanne and Teresa are both just like in shock, and Deborah loves that it was the only title. Frida just wants to say out loud, she's very happy to be here to celebrate.
Oh.
And Danielle asks, can you tell us how you approached character development in reference to the pandemic, especially since you were writing this in the middle of the worst of it? So
my
character
gosh.
development. Yeah.
Character development. Yeah, so as I said, yeah, Barry and I were talking about different situations that came up in the pandemic. And so that definitely affected, like I said, the relationship between the main character and Luca, the main character and her work friends. So yeah, we deliberately tried to show how relationships would be impacted at various stages of the pandemic. Yeah, it didn't, yeah.
So who changed the most? So you had a kind of the story manuscript, you had it in some sort of draft form,
Yeah.
and then you decided to add the pandemic stuff. Who changed the most in this story?
I don't know that the characters themselves changed that much. I think maybe Luca, the kind of romantic interest, because as I said before, the pandemic thread was woven in there. He was, that relationship ended the same way
Right.
Kelsey's relationship with Michaela ended, mostly
changed
because
it.
of the mom, because at that point the story was more about the mom, like Kelsey and her mom, than about the pandemic. And he
Susan,
was scared of it.
Susan, I'm going to come back to your question because you've already had one go. So I'm going to let other people have their first go, and then I'll come back, I promise. Frida asks, what do you hope kids will take away from this story?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, it's funny, this whole thing that as writers, we heard from the beginning that, oh, people don't want to read about the pandemic. I don't think that's true. I never thought that was true. And I guess it was a little bit arrogant of me to just ignore that. Like, I'm going to write about it anyway. But I really think it will help people process what they've gone through. And, we all know how important as writers, we talk about representation all the time. And
yeah,
so I think for kids to see themselves in this book, whether they're relating to it because of what they went through during the pandemic, or because they have, are dealing with difficult people, for whatever reason, I got the most touching message from someone messaged me yesterday and just said, I didn't even know how much my adult child needed this book. This was, how I grew up. And she was just, she said, I would have loved a book like that at Kelsey's age. So, it's for kids to process this awful, to see themselves reflected in the pandemic stuff, and if they're going through other stuff too. So yeah, I hope they know that they're not alone. That's what I want them to take away.
I definitely think they'll get that.
Alone. Yeah.
So heavy on the empathy. I definitely don't think they're alone. They're not the only ones suffering this.
Right.
Joyce asks, how old would the ideal reader for this book be? How do you decide what age range to write for?
Yeah, so this one, I guess, just because of there's some fairly mature content in it, and I think Barry had set it at 13 and up, and I think that's the right age range. My last book was a middle grade. Yeah, there just wasn't, because of the drug and alcohol content, and in this case, the Kelsey herself also ends up, trying to numb her pain with substances. So, you might have a story about parents using substances in a middle grade, but not the main character themselves. So That's the difference here. So that would make it a 13 and up as opposed to a 9 to 12. And I guess the writing is just more complicated too, I think. Yeah.
Teresa asks, do you make yourself laugh when you write humorous scenes?
Yes. I'm not ashamed of it.
It's
And
good. It's a good sign if you laugh.
it's interesting. I worked in television for like a hot second. I wrote for one season on a half-hour comedy, and I learned a lot from those comedy writers, and they devote the entire final pass of the manuscript to the punch up. And
Punching up the funny.
you've
Yes.
worked in,
Yeah.
you've done screenplays as well. So yeah, I tried to, we were told on staff, make sure there's 3 like out loud laughs on every
Yep.
page. So this isn't kind of a ha-ha funny kind of book. It's a different kind of humor, but I did try and make sure I had 3 kind of really witty or super sharp things on every page.
There was really funny, and it was really kind of, I like the snarky kind of humor sometimes. That I enjoy. I enjoy that. Okay. I put Susan off for a minute, so I got to come back to her. Me again. I was reading your note on Facebook that one of your school visits was called off because of the drug content in the story. Can you talk a bit about this? It's such a shame.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I was really annoyed. I wasn't, it's not a shame. It's wrong.
Yeah, it was disappointing. I have a few school visits lined up, and one of them had asked, I think she assumed, it was a pandemic book. She hadn't read much about it or anything about it, I guess. But yeah, so she had asked me to send her a synopsis of the book because she was going to put together a buy form. And then she got back to me and she said, she said, is the drug use a big part of the book? And I said, yes, it is. And and she pulled out, and it would have been 13 years old. It would have been for 13-year-olds. And she thought the material was inappropriate. That was the word that was used. And we have heard, I think it originated with Laurie Hall Sanderson. I'm not sure who talked one year about how, if kids hear that books about them are inappropriate, what they hear is they are inappropriate. They feel shamed.
Yeah.
And, if she thinks that 13-year-olds aren't experiencing this, or the character in the book is older than 13, but kids read up. Like 13-year-olds want to read about kids a little older than them. And I don't know if she thinks that no 13-year-old has had any relatives with substance use issues or haven't thought about numbing pain with substances.
It's just more of making people feel alone. Like if you take that away from them, right?
And shamed, for having these experiences.
Which, by the way, everyone does. Everyone does.
Yeah.
Mel is here. She says, I am so impressed by the creative output during the pandemic and how it fueled the story. Many writers have had trouble focusing and creating during this period. How did you find your way to creativity during the past year?
Very good question. So as I said, I was super, super lucky to already have a draft of something. So I didn't even start. There were plenty of scenes that needed to be written from scratch in the rewrite, but I didn't start out with those scenes. I started just adjusting the draft I had, and that was a great way in, because that was easier work to do. Like I said, did lack the focus and concentration at the beginning that everybody else did, but editing is easier than writing in that way.
Revising.
It's revising. Yes. Revising and editing the scenes that were already there. That's what I started with. And then I found myself really sort of getting immersed in the world, getting really excited about the rewrite. And by the time I finished, working on the scenes I already had, I was ready to write the new material. And then, as I said, I was really grateful to have this project, because once I was really deeply into the writing, I love that. That was really super helpful for me as a way to not think about all the other stuff. I could
Yeah.
just get
Therapy,
immersed in the world, have a
meditative,
flow
yeah.
state. Yeah, it's amazing.
So Jean and Deborah both asked the same question, so I'm going to put them together, which is, do you ever make yourself cry when you write certain scenes?
um, I don't know that I cried, and it's interesting because a few people have told me the different spots that they cried at.
I
Like,
cried at the counselor one. At the counselor section,
yeah.
I cried because I've had that experience
Oh my
where
God.
I go in and ask for help and they're just like, oh, that's not what I'm here to do today. And you're just like, but I'm coming apart at the
That's
seams.
so funny, Angela, because that's like a funny scene. It's kind of a lighter scene, but it's
It's so
but,
ironic though. It's so
yeah.
bad.
But
Yeah.
I'm so happy. Like it's hard to make yourself laugh and cry, because also you see the material so much. There are so many passes through the manuscript, you get so tired of it. And yeah, so your own rewrites, and then once it's sold, you have your story edits with your editor, and then copy edits, and then proofreading. So you've read this thing like a bajillion times by the time it comes out. So yeah. You kind of, yeah, you lose all sensitivity about everything.
Miss Jill Andrew asks, our own Jill Andrew, or
Oh,
MPP.
MP.
Those are discussions at schools, in person, Zoom, or outdoors. And what response have you heard from adolescents thus far?
Well, it hasn't been out very long, but friends have told me their kids have read it and are really, really enjoying it. And it's funny because sometimes the initial copies, the advanced copies, and the initial copies are being read by people. And
Yeah.
we've all had this experience where it's people are reading it, but you're not hearing
I
anything.
know, it's like the worst. It's
The worst. It's like, why am I hearing like nothing? They're hating it. But with this one, I know that I've gotten so many messages saying like, and I know it's mostly still friends and relatives at this point, but they are getting back to me and with like really genuine messages of like, my kid read this and then I read it and we both like loved it. And I'm getting such nice responses, and I've responses like I've never really gotten before. So it feels different. It's really nice.
That's so good. That
Yeah.
is so good. Jeffrey actually asked a question that I had didn't ask you earlier, which now I'm glad I get to ask. As the pandemic continued, have you thought that would like to continue the story? So my question was a continuation. Where would Kelsey be right now?
Oh my gosh. I haven't even thought of that.
Would she be in university? Would she
Yeah,
be...
so she'd absolutely be in university, and this would be the year that she's there in person. So maybe having her first in-person experience at university. But
It's nice to think about.
yeah, I don't know. I like how the story wrapped up. So I'm not really thinking in terms of a sequel. Yeah.
Susan is asking if you will read one of your favorite sections from the book.
I'll read your favorite section.
Yay!
I'll read the guidance section.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a very short scene, and it comes kind of toward the end of the book. So it's not one of the super heavy sections. And it comes once certain things have happened that I won't give away, that have made Kelsey realize she absolutely has to reach out for help in some way. And I wrote this scene because I wanted kids to know sometimes, your initial attempts at reaching out and getting help might not work, but keep trying. So this is one of those examples of that. I make a virtual guidance appointment and get assigned to an older counselor, a Mrs. Wallace, dressed in a pink velour tracksuit, who spends a good 5 minutes of our session trying to figure out why her sound isn't working. Of course, I wind up with the one counselor even more techno deficient than me. I give her some suggestions. I've learned a few things, and finally she gets it working. She had another app open that was using the mic. Thank you, dear, she says. So how can I help you today, Kelsey? Suddenly, I'm not sure where to begin. I think I want to talk about my life with someone. Okay, that told her nothing. Why didn't I practice this? I take a couple seconds to gather my thoughts. I've been dealing with some stuff at home, and I think some of it might have affected me in a bunch of ways. I think maybe it would be a good idea to work through it with a professional. I'm pretty proud of myself for what I think is a fairly good summation of my situation, but it's clear I've come to the wrong place. Mrs. Wallace looked super surprised and confused. Oh, I'm so sorry, dear, she says. I mostly deal with schedule conflicts and university applications. You're in grade 12, yes? Did I see you in December? I don't remember you. I almost laugh out loud. Has she not watched any Netflix movies for the past 5 years? The student mental health problem is epidemic, and Kids Help Phone has reported a 50% increase in calls since the pandemic started. Ugh, I should have asked Ms. Cole to give me the contact info for whoever she had in mind that time. She probably knew Mrs. Wallace would be useless for personal stuff. No, I tell her, I was at a different school in December. I just applied to general programs at a few places. I pause, though I'm wondering now if that was a mistake. Many people do a general first year, then focus in on something afterward. Would you like to take an aptitude test, she adds? I say yes, what the hell, and spend the next half hour answering questions like, what would you rather do, go to a party or stay home and read? Who can ever answer these questions? Sometimes I feel like going to a party, and sometimes I feel like staying home to read. Ultimately, the test decides I'm an extroverted introvert, whatever that is, and would make the perfect funeral parlor owner. Did you find that helpful? Mrs. Wallace asks when I'm done. Not really, no. Oh, she looks perplexed. Well, I'm sure we'll figure something out. Let's book another time next week. Mrs. Wallace, is there a social worker or a psychologist or someone who comes to the school that I can talk to about, personal stuff? Oh, yes. The next time he'll be available is, she glances at a calendar, the 20th of June. I almost laugh, but Wallace looks distressed and says, that's quite far away, isn't it? I begin to feel more kindly disposed toward her, even though she should probably be told her first words to a student in distress should be something other than, I mostly deal with scheduling conflicts.
Okay, the number of people who have jumped into the chat, they're like, I have experienced this, is depressing. It's depressing. So we have a question from Emily about the cover for the books. I'm going to show that just in case you are all not looking at it. Can you tell us a little bit about how this came about?
Yeah, there were a couple concepts batted around. At first we had, because of the text scenes, we had a cover with a phone on it and some text. Yes, we had a cover with a phone, but that was kind of something that we thought worked better in theory than in practice. And then Barry, I think, came up with the concept of riffing on that, the COVID hand washing poster. And we made the cover artist is a woman named Emily Whedon, who I believe has a DCB Cormorant book coming out. And yeah, she did a very nice job with that concept, made the sort of riffed on those COVID hand washing drawings, made them a little pop arty. Yeah, and that's the story of the cover.
It's very cool. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like the colors.
Yeah, I know. So there was a question from Jill that I missed, and Chantal is just reminding me of it, which is, she asked, do you think you'd ever put this up on the stage? It's interesting.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah, I would. Now that you've mentioned it.
I know, right?
Yeah. Wow, I've never thought of that before.
I think it could work.
The Amelia book on the stage, but yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Oh, from
Right.
Jill's ears to God's, yeah. We'll
Ah.
get that done. Yes, we'll get that done. So we're getting ready to wrap things up on this end, Miss Bev. So if you wanted to do your thank yous. I'm just going to mention that Another Story bookstore, you can get these copies on Saturdays when you're going to be there. Is that right?
Yes, I'm going to be there Saturday from 4 to 5:30 in front of the store signing copies.
Get your copy.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up a couple copies for the holidays because I'm hearing about book shortages and I don't want to run into
Yes.
that.
Oh, we should
So,
tell everybody what's
Yeah.
happening there. So we're hearing about supply chain issues. So everybody, if you're thinking of giving books for the holiday season, order them now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would just like to thank Anjula and Another Story. Anybody in Toronto who hasn't been to Another Story, it's a fantastic bookshop on Roncesvalles, committed to social change through books. Great, really well curated shop. I'd like to thank Barry for all the reasons I talked about during this conversation. He was so instrumental in shaping the book into what it is now. Had so many great ideas, and everyone at DCB Cormorant Press, especially Sarah Jensen's or Cooper, especially Chantal Cho, who I've been making. I've just been inundating with requests the last little while. So she has the patience of a saint.
She takes it very well. She takes it very well.
My agent, Stacy Conla, who came in kind of in the late stage editorially on this project, but did one great pass with me, has a fantastic editorial eye, helped me sell this book. I'd like to thank you, Angela, for doing it for me. You're so amazing, such a great writer, friend, neighbor, interviewer. She did, for those who don't know Angela, she does 10 million things. Like, it's amazing. She's the digital director of The Walrus on top of everything you heard before. She writes screenplays on top of all her novels. She teaches journalism.
This is a mutual love society right here. This is what this is. Also, I'm going to hire Bev as my publicist.
And I'd like to thank the entire Canadian Kidlit communities, especially the Toronto Kidlit community. There are so many people who came out tonight and also have been just really supportive of the book on social media. Like, this is the greatest community you could find yourself in. Everyone is so wonderful, smart, fun, loving, supportive. It's just the greatest community. And also my personal bubble through the pandemic, Andy, Autumn, Ricky, Brian, these were the greatest people I could have been stuck with. All amazing. I love you all very much. And oh my God, thank God I had you all during the pandemic. And that's all I can say. And my writer friends, I know a lot of you, we haven't seen each other in person for a long time, but hopefully that'll change soon.
It will. And I'm going to hand things back to Angela. You want to take back this mic, my friend? I'm handing you a virtual mic, Anju. There you go.
There we go. And here is Bev's fantastic book. Pick it up from Another Story, pick it up from an indie bookshop in Toronto or Canada. Bev, thank you so much for writing this. This is a really important book for us, and we're going to make sure we sell it far and wide to schools across the GTA and beyond, because it's really so important. And it's going to be so important for so many young readers, right, who have been living through this, and to feel themselves represented, because that's what we're about. So thank you, Bev, from all of us for bringing this out to the world.
That.
And thank you, of course, to DCB, an imprint of Cormorant Books, because really no author is out there without their publishers. So a big thank you to Cormorant Books and all the work they do to bring great voices out into the Canadian literary landscape. Thank you, Angela. You are a fantastic, engaging interviewer. Do more of this, and I can't wait till we're back to live events, and would love to have you all here. We'll see you all on Saturday at 4 o'clock. And if you can't come then, order a book online and Bev will sign it for you. Okay, good night, everyone. And thanks again to Chantal.
Good night.
Have a great night.
Mwah.